Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to first introduce a couple of people who are with us on the call. Martha Schulte, if you can say hello.
Hello.
Okay. And Susan Elkins is muted and we don't have her camera on, but she is with us as well. But if she could say hello. Or maybe she's off eating her lunch. Okay, so today we're going to walk through kind of what JCHE looks for in our in journal submissions. We're going to walk through kind of 5 key steps I think it takes to really write a journal article and get it submitted. Talk about what do we need from you when you submit a journal article, so you kind of have a checklist of things that you would want to make sure you do when you submit that. And we'll do some brainstorming fairly early on the kinds of topics that you're interested in trying to submit. So I want to try to get to that as quickly as I can. I'm going to start by sharing my screen and get us going with that. Share. Okay. So we've titled this thing, Stop Procrastinating, 5 Easy Steps to Writing a JCHE Article. And the subtitles, for those who have been thinking about it for too long. So if you fit that, I'm glad you're here. So what do we publish? We publish 3 times a year in March and July and in November. But the reality is that once an article is accepted for publication, it's available on the publisher's website. So once an article has gone through all the processes, we really will actually publish it. We try to publish everything through a double-blind review, and I'll explain what that means in just a few minutes. Publish both research articles and what we call ideas in practice, and I'll cover that in just a minute. We have some recurring columns, a distance learning column, a prior learning assessment column, and notes and trends. And then occasionally we publish a book review, and I will cover that as well. So we also, one thing that I like to point out is if you have an article that you want to get that's kind of a hot topic and doesn't need to kind of do the whole thing that we do with the journal, Evolution is a really good place to publish that. So if you don't know about that, reach out to Shauna Cox from Evolution. First of all, there's no peer review, so it doesn't have the same laborious process for Evolution. Certainly quicker to publish and it has a more open format. So think about your topic for that, if in addition to the journal. And so who reads the journal? That's real important that if you're thinking about you want to submit, you got to think about who is the readership. And so I think it breaks out into the really 3 broad categories. In adult serving or adult focused institutions through the US, Canada, and the world, both administrators, staff, and faculty, and then continuing education practitioners, and then certainly adult education faculty and students. And it really is a focus on practitioner that sort of distinguishes JCHE from the other higher education journals. And that translates into about 45,000 article downloads during our most recent annual year from across the world. And you can see where those articles come from. About half are from the US and Canada. About 22% come from Europe, about 13% from Asia, 9% from what they call Australasia, which is really Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and so forth, and about 5% from Africa. We do see many more submissions from Australasia and from Africa than we had in the past. Right now we're at about 110 submissions a year from across the world. So there's a sizable number of authors contributing now. What are we looking for? You can see here, I'm not going to spend the time to read this to you, but we actually spend a lot of time in the editorial board working on our call for papers. This is trying to tell you, this is exactly what we're after. Most of us in ACHE really do focus on some area of this. We're trying to make sure that we correctly define that. Martha and Susan, I wonder if you want to comment on this particular part of the presentation here. Do you have anything to say? Want to say about that?
Well, I can say that, as you can see, there are lots of options for publication, just as there are lots of options within ACHE to be involved and to find what your department, your institution does really well. There's lots of opportunities to publish what your institution does very well. And so that is why you have a lot of different bullet points here, because continuing professional education has lots of different options and bullet points. So it may look very diverse. That's purposeful, because our journal reaches lots of different populations, and there's lots of opportunities for you to publish.
Okay. Susan, you have anything to say about this? Okay. So we are right now recruiting for people to submit for a special edition on marketing. And this is really about how to develop and promote new programs. How do we advertise and reach adult students? How do we effectively recruit and admit adult students? What are effective pricing strategies for both continuing higher education and continuing education? And how do scholarships work in a marketing strategy and any other? So that you've got an area that you're interested in doing in that area. We are definitely looking for those. We're trying to put together a special edition on that topic. So research articles about 7,000 words, up to 7,000 words. We need an abstract of 250 words and 5 to 6 keywords that help describe the article. That's what the research articles consist of. And examples of research articles, we've had articles on prior learning assessment, online learning, recruiting, mostly about creative efforts to serve adult learners. We have a lot of articles about serving adult learners. That's really the area of focus of the journal. And those are the areas often which have the highest number of downloads. So people look to us to be publishing in this area, and that's really what we try to do. Had a lot of articles recently on serving veterans, and that sort of fits in that category of how do you serve adult learners. And then some good number of articles on continuing education programs, continuing professional development. And we're looking for more in that area. And then what we call ideas and practice. This is you've got a practice that you're doing. I've invited Lisa to submit in this category about the PLA program at University of in Texarkana and Texas A&M and Texarkana. And this is up to 4,000 words. We're looking for new, innovative, successful programs or services. And we want to make sure that when we talk about them in the journal, we're talking about how they are replicable. How can I pick up on this idea and make this happen at my institution? And authors really need to address that issue. And we're looking for a literature base, but it doesn't need to be as extensive as it is for the research articles. So those are the two broad categories: research articles and ideas and practice articles. And ideas and practice, we've had improving quality in online courses. We have an article about continuing education business incubators, this use of discussion boards, leadership development, team member exchange, using open educational resources. Those are just some examples from a few recent years that we've published in that area. Those are ideas and practice. And then book review, we're looking for somebody to make a recommendation about the book, and we're looking for some creative thought about the book itself. So if you're interested in book review, talk with me and I'll be happy to coach you through that process. So how do you go about writing? What's the process of writing? One of the things I think as you think about this is, how do you overcome procrastination? That's really that central task for anybody who wants to write. And probably the most central strategy that everybody who writes about this is do some on it every day. Set a timer and do at least 30 minutes every day. That could be thinking about the topic, reading about the topic, and then writing about the topic, at least 30 minutes every day. The idea is it keeps it present in your mind so that your subconscious is always working on the topic. And as you're doing this thing, do your research first. That research will keep getting refined as you move through the topic. Use what I'm calling a mind map, and I'll explain that here in just a second. One of the things that's helpful when you get to the stage where you can start writing is just open up a piece of paper and write gibberish. Something about that process of doing something on the paper is helpful for freeing your mind to get started. Remember that you're writing a completely imperfect first draft. The first draft is totally imperfect. All writing is rooted in revision, and you're going to revise it many times. I don't think perfection should ever be the goal in what we're trying to write. You're looking for about 90% is a really good goal to get to. Ask the person who needs the document what they want. Well, you're doing that by coming here, so that's good. And then discipline yourself. Block out Facebook, block out Twitter, block out LinkedIn, block out all of those things that want to grab your attention. Block those out because you need to focus on this. Don't play with fonts or formatting or anything like that. You're just getting text down. You can play with how it looks later on. One of the things I think is really useful is to go out and talk to colleagues, mentors, and advisors. They can really help you in thinking about kind of how do I approach this topic? How do I keep going with this? And remind yourself why you are writing. What are your goals with trying to do this? So here's an example of a mind map. I recently wrote a piece that was about, how do you think about persistence with some data in the Clearinghouse, National Student Research Clearinghouse. I thought was really interesting. I wanted to write about that. I knew that the focus of the article needed to be on persistence, and wanted to compare it with traditionals. There's different sort of the approaches working with traditionals and non-traditional students. I want to make sure I included some strategies for improving persistence, and to make sure that I had a good hook for the article. This is not for the journal; it's for it's for evolution. So that's an example of a mind map. So take a piece of paper, it's going to scribble out the pieces and think about how they are connected. What's at the center of the article that you're trying to accomplish? So I want to take some time right here, and Amanda's going to help us out by putting these into the. I'm going to stop the screen share for just a second. What I want to ask you to do is to talk about a topic that you're interested in writing about. And Amanda's going to put those in the chat, and Catherine is going to write them all down so we can kind of follow back up with you. But I'm going to go around and see if people have some ideas that they want to try to write about. I'm going to call on everybody, so be prepared for this. So what do you think? Who's willing to go first? So Martha-Ann, open up your mic and talk.
Would you like me to share, Walt?
Yes, please.
Well, this is a bit self-serving because currently I'm working at New Mexico Highlands University, and it's a non-degree program, basically in a MOOC style. And New Mexico, the state is unique in that it is a bilingual state. And also it has a lot of Native and Indigenous population within it. And so one of the new initiatives that my university is working on and is asking me to look into is not just bilingual education, but multilingual education. And especially thinking about ACHE or JCHE, I'm wondering how can I look at that for adult populations?
Okay, so this is one of the things that I want to point out to you. Martha-Ann is talking about a topic here which is really useful, very, very kind of multilingual education, but she's thinking specifically about how she connects it to JCHE, to ACHE. And that's one of the critical things that we see. Right now, I'm getting a lot of submissions that are about COVID-19 and its impact on higher education. Well, if you can't connect it to the adult student focus that ACHE has, it probably would not get accepted. So this is a way to take these bigger topics and you have to think about how they parse down to how are adult students affected by this. That's really important. Lisa, you want to talk about your topic?
Sure. I've been working on this actually for a couple of years, but I've not written it up. But we have started using our portfolio development process, which is embedded in a course for our BAAS degree completion students. But we're using portfolio development to identify and develop soft skills that are in demand in business and industry right now. And we've had a lot of success with that.
So Lisa presented about this on Monday, a really well done presentation. And she's got the foundations of a good ideas and practice article that would really be helpful. May even be a research article, depending upon how far you've gone with your data on that. So a good topic. Anne, how about you? You're going to be publishing more in your new role. So tell us more about that.
Well, I guess the thing that I'm thinking the most about lately is restructuring in higher education, and specifically what that big category, right, non-traditional fits within not just the broad future of higher education, but within processes inside institutions to do transformation and consciousness raising with leadership and traditional faculty. It seems like that's the thing I'm always thinking about and working on. Many of us are always doing that work, right? But in the past, I've presented on the question specifically with respect to reorganizing our School of Professional and Continuing Ed and merging with graduate and the purposes for that. And now what I'm participating in right now is a strategic planning process, which promises to, I don't know, put at the center of, but, that has a primary place for non-traditional programming and whether it be degree, non-degree, badging, all these different things. So it's very amorphous still at this time, as you can tell, this particular topic, but it's salient and everywhere.
No, it sounds like you've got some stuff that might belong in evolution and might belong in the journal. So that's interesting stuff to do. Alex, how about you? You got a topic you want to write about?
Well, how about this? The topic I want to write about or a topic I want to read about? Right? So
Call for stuff to
I'm teasing. But such a good question. I would say that there are stuff. I think what's always kind of a challenge is there's stuff that you want to write about, but you don't feel that you're the kind of the subject matter expert in the area. And so like if there was enough people to kind of come in and kind of help you do something, I think there would be a lot more willingness to end up doing it. But I would say based on your prompt, the two that kind of really strike me and something that's hitting me right now is a topic around apprenticeships and in workforce development. And then also too, I really think that there's potentially, if we're doing some sort of peer-reviewed study, just comparing this past 18 months and the focus of moving classes online to classes in person and what some of those outcomes and discrepancies were, I think would be really interesting to looking back over the next, looking back on. But I think that would be, much more complicated to write and kind of research, but I think that those would be both very interesting articles that would strike me.
Who here feels like they're a total expert in the topic they want to write about? Raise your hand. You are. Nobody. We have a perspective. That's what we're sharing when we write a journal article. It's a perspective. I'm not saying I know everything about this topic. I'm saying I know this about the topic. I have some conclusions I can share in that regard. That's all the claim that we're making. So I think that's a really, I'm glad you raised that point. Sherry, how about you? You have a topic you want to add.
Yes, I am interested in how our adult learners and non-trad students perceive their learning experiences and how they feel about being engaged in their college experience. They may not have much interest in being any further engaged than they are, but it's something I'd like to know. And really, how does that relate to retention?
So the question of engagement is a really useful thing. It's sort of been viewed as not important in persistence, but I think if you have to redefine it, I would encourage you, Sherry, to talk with Amy Jordan from Loyola, which has a pretty long history of getting adult students engaged. And I think that's an interesting topic they've really pulled up. And with a persistence rate in the 80% range, that it seems to be having some impact on their persistence. So Clayton, how about you? What's your topic? What are you interested?
Oh my gosh, I was praying you wouldn't call on me. One of my focus areas here and something we're investigating, how to redesign traditional curriculum to embrace non-traditional course delivery methods that are needed by adult learners. You know, asynchronous versus synchronous, mini sessions versus traditional semester quarter systems, and also being able to judge skills that they already have for prior learning assessment. So that's the direction we're headed in, and I would like to pull some good research from the projects we have currently going, and that would probably be where I'd go with it.
You've got a lot of stuff.
I know.
Planning it and bringing it together. Yeah, that's a really big agenda. That's really interesting stuff in there. Sheila, how about you? What are you interested in publishing about?
So this is probably the recency factor, but we just updated our credit for prior learning policy for the California State University system, which is 23 campuses. And we've been working with Kale, so we brought in a partner. I would love to write about our journey and our experience in taking a very dated policy and really bringing it in, to line for the modern learner. So and our lessons learned, what we're still learning, we're not done. So I think that might be of interest.
Ideas in practice article that would be very relevant for us.
Yep.
Very good. Lancella, how about you?
Hi. So I currently work with our weekend, evening, and online adult undergraduate program. And I am one of the coordinators for our peer mentor program. So I would want to kind of focus on a peer mentor program and how to, as we were growing it, we're seeing how there may be a difference between our traditional students and non-traditional students. So just kind of describing that and talking about that. And then I also remember there was another topic that I think is really important, and it's our parenting students and our student caretakers, because I think that experience is different than our traditional students. So yeah, those would be a couple of topics.
Lancella, I want to encourage you to work with Amy Jordan, who
Okay.
has a strong peer mentor program. And the two of you, I'd say bring that on. That's a really useful topic for us. Okay, who have I missed? Go ahead, Carrie. You're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to find my button, sorry.
Okay.
About a year ago, I was hired to the position of CARES coordinator, which is our co-requisite remediation class. And I started doing research back when I first got hired about the difference between the 0 level courses where students didn't receive any credit in comparison to the co-requisite where they take a lab course on the side, but they're getting college credit for it. And because our population is so extensive, we have non-traditional students. We work with a lot of high school students from rural schools where they don't learn a lot of the skills that they need to go into college. We work with non-native speakers of English. I mean, it's just a combined classroom of so many different students that aren't prepared for college and helping them get there while they're getting college credits. And our experience so far, we've been doing it for almost 5 years, has been really, it's not huge, but we are showing some success to how it used to be. And so that's a program I really want to share with other people or other universities that hopefully, if they're not already doing this, they can see the benefits within their own educational systems.
So an example of a good ideas and practice article. and just think about what are the steps that you think would be replicable in the process that you're putting forward. And it doesn't take much more than surveys or outcome assessments to give you a database to work with in the ideas and practice article.
Thank you.
Amy, did you have an article you want to talk about or something?
I do, and I'm a little hesitant because it could end up in Reader's Digest.
Okay.
Long journal. So mine is more of a, well, any writing becomes autobiographical, but I'm concerned about the public perception of the online teacher. I think we've been a little bit demoted in the nobility of teaching. So that's one of the prompts for my article, for my book or article, which is basically kind of reflections and historical perspectives. My first teaching job, I was 20 years old and I was trained as a Montessori teacher. And I've been teaching ever since in various levels or doing administrative or development work, always with academia. So I'm looking at a theme of academic beliefs and trends and compromises as I've traveled through my career, which is my greatest joy. I love that I'm being a teacher. But I'd like to incorporate the students' experiences. I'd like to call this something like Learn Your Way Up. I constantly remind students to ask themselves, why am I here on this Wednesday night in a Zoom class when I really would like to be playing tennis or whatever? So learning your way up. And my audience, primary audience, would be students who need to get over, returning adult students who need to get over that moment of failure that they felt. Just learn your way up. And if there was some kind of article that was inspirational about the very nobility of being a teacher and working with the variety of students I've met in my life and continue to meet, I would just like to write something probably motivational, inspirational, something that is not too, probably a little fluffy, really, according to, I don't know what kind of data I would collect. But the joy of knowing all these students is just never going to leave me.
Yeah. Well, that might be an article for evolution, or a series of articles for evolution. And depends upon how you cast. It might be an article for the journal in terms of ideas and practice. So good one to think through. Okay.
Thanks.
Did I miss anybody else? Did we get Stephanie? Right. Okay. So let me share the screen and go back to that. Stephanie, did we get you in?
No, but I was hoping you weren't going to.
Well, you weren't alone.
I don't consider myself a writer. And like Alex said, I don't consider myself an expert on any kind of subject matter. I think there's just so much to know and so much to learn. It's really hard to say, yes, I'm the authority on such and such XYZ. I don't feel like that at all. But if I had to come up with something off the top of my head, I attended an amazing workshop this morning on creating equitable and empowering learning experiences for Native American students. So of course, where I work, our mission is social justice and environmental and economic justice. We focus on that. So social justice access for marginalized populations would be of interest to me. We have a very small population of Native American students where I work. So that would be something, to explore. How could we embrace the communities more? Here in California, our native tribe is Chumash. So how could we bring them into the university more? What would that take, and how do we build those relationships? And then the other thing I was thinking about too is the experience of students, but also of faculty, kind of what Amy was talking about, with the transition to online learning at the beginning of the pandemic. Like most of us, I think everyone had to pivot really quickly at the beginning of the pandemic to deliver education. but in a really different way, unlike anything we were used to. Here where I work, it's very high touch. People are in my office. I'm not faculty, but I'm an administrator, and students are in my office all the time, as well as faculty. So, what was that journey like for everybody?
Well, that's a topic we'll be writing about for a long time. So I want to encourage you to work with Martha Ann, who comes from an institution which has a lot of Native American learners, and possibly doing a piece on that. That's something you might want to collaborate with her on. So these are good things to think about. These do not have to be singular. They can be group collaborations on stuff. So this is a good way to think about this. Let me go ahead and get us back into the presentation. Okay, so I got to find the right slide here. All right. So if you want to work up a topic, let me get this thing into. Okay. So one of the things that if you're working up a topic, just look over the articles that have been published on that topic in the last 10 years in JCHE, and you can do that actually in Google Scholar. They do a really good job of restricting which journal you're looking at. And then you're going to ask yourself, what's not been addressed? What do I disagree with? Or maybe I have a better approach. So that would be a good topic area to bring up. I always think an iterative process of talking to colleagues, mentors, and advisors. And then reach out to one of us. I'm going to give you the list of the editorial board members. We're always willing to talk about what we're interested in doing. If we have talked to you about it, we would not be the reviewer of it. But I'm never a reviewer, so I'm always willing to talk to people about topics. So you want to look those over and think that through. You're welcome to talk to me or to any of the editorial board members. In our review process, we use what's called a double-blind review. That means that the article comes to me, I will see your what's called a blinded copy and your non-blinded copy, and I will assign it to two of the reviewers. They will get the blinded copy. They will not know who it's coming from, who wrote the article. They have no idea about that. So it's a blind review. They will review your article. They've got 45 days to review the article. And then they let me know, is this accept? There are very few people that actually get an accept from the first time through. Usually what comes back is, we want to see these revisions in the next version. And you've got 30 days to get that done. And then it comes back to the reviewers to do that again. And rarely if ever, do we reject a paper. We reject paper because for the most part, it's not in our call for papers, not addressing the stuff we're trying for. And the editorial board is all of them are reviewers. So that's the review process. Just remember that the reviewers do not know who you are when they're doing their review. Each member of the editorial board reviews about between 5 and 6 reviews per year. And I've just described the process. So it takes about 6 months till we get to where an article is ready for us to start sending it to proofreading if we're going to accept it. That takes a little while. And right now we have a backlog of papers that have been reviewed, and we have enough to pub for all of our editions next year. So the reviewers are looking at these criteria. I'm not going to spend time on this. Just this is what they have is in their checklist, and they're looking at this, and they're trying to give you feedback on the basis of these criteria. We accept for publication about 40% of our submissions. And as I said before, that's rare that a place gets accepted first draft. What gets paper rejected? Ignoring the call for papers. It's being out of scope of publication. If there's something unsound about the research, the research is maybe combining Peter to pay Paul, doesn't really fit together, that can get it rejected. Not being of sufficient interest to our readership. And to be honest with you, particularly with international submissions, a formidable level of writing errors. The reviewers sort of throw their hands up and say, I can't handle this, it's too much. You do want to put some polish into any paper that you do. So 5 steps to writing. First thing to do is develop the topic. You're going to change this as you work it through. It's going to change a number of times. Ask yourself, is this going to be of interest to the readers of JCHE? I think you've all described topics that would definitely be of interest to our readers. And then do the research. Using Google Scholar is really a useful way to begin. Find all the pieces of literature that are even somewhat on point. Well, I find myself going off into tangents as I do this thing. The goal is to pile all this stuff up and say, what's relevant in this, in that pile that I do everything. Gather everything electronically. Access to a good library is absolutely essential. You've got to make sure that your library is strong when you're doing this sort of work. I think OneNote and OneDrive are excellent for organizing this sort of stuff. You're going to dump stuff in there and make some notes on that. And I find it very useful to do a spreadsheet if I'm doing a research article to gather the research. Here are the 10 articles I'm interested in, or the 20 articles I'm interested in. And here's the point in this one, or the 5 points in this one that are particularly relevant. And I'll gather those that, and I'll make sure I've entered a separate element in the spreadsheet for each element from that paper that I've read that is relevant. So I can reorganize those things as I'm doing my literature review. So, and I can show you how to do this if you're interested. We are completely agnostic about how you do your research. It can be quantitative, it can be qualitative, you can use mixed methods. The important thing is work toward clear conclusions. Interpreting data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, is a really central skill. It's in short supply. It needs the most work of anything that you do in this thing. What are you saying? How do we know that what you're saying is correct? So that's what we're looking for. And as you write, you're going to do an outline. You're going to write an abstract. Changes to this are absolutely inevitable. Then you want to write materials and methods. How did you conduct your research? Can you describe the sample? One of the things I find is that a lot of times people fail to describe the sample adequately. That's one of the first, I read that if I don't see a description of the sample that includes adult learners, I'm going to send it back to, where's your sample here? Can you describe the sample more clearly? What is your process of analysis? And then, so you describe your materials and methods, you write up your results. Here are the data. What does my analysis say? And then beyond that, what does this mean? What do we learn from this process? Then you go rework the abstract, and then begin to write your introduction and your conclusion. So people get these things out of order. You need to focus primarily on the materials and methods, and then the results, and then the discussion, and then everything else flows out of that. And that's kind of feels like it's backwards, but it really does work better if you use this approach when you're writing. Then you want to revise. Lots of revision. This is absolutely the essential part of writing. Revise for clarity and conciseness. Revise again for grammar and punctuation. Then revise for APA 7 compliance and citations. That's the in-text, Pearson 2000. And then the reference list, which is Pearson W 2000, at the end. And then I'd say, once you've gone through this sort of revision, I'd send it out again to get some more feedback from colleagues, mentors, and friends. And once you've gone through that process and you're ready, you can submit it. And here's how we go about submitting. We use a portal. It's called Editorial Manager. And in the portal, we get a first Microsoft Word document that includes the author information, and it's not blinded. And then we have a blinded copy that includes the abstract, the keywords, the manuscript, the acknowledgements, declaration of interest, reference lists, tables, and figures. And we've got some guidelines here. There's a link to what our publisher has as guidelines. It's really useful to consult that. So what JCHE needs is a title page, an abstract, keywords. I'm going to cover those here in just real briefly. Main text introduction, the materials and methods, the results, the discussion, then any acknowledgements. If you've gotten grant funding for this, it's useful to do this. A declaration of interest here. The references, we do want you to use APA 7, but if you're more comfortable with this, the publisher says that they'll conform it to APA 7. I think Catherine would argue that's not a good idea. We just need to put it in APA 7 from the beginning. And then attach on each item on a separate page, tables and figures with captions on individual pages. That's what we actually need in the documents. The abstract needs to be at less than 250 words, and it's really just a bare bones approach. It's, your efficiency is favored over style. It's justified, so it's produced in with the two margins. And what the authors call IMRAD, introduction, methods, results, and discussions. So that should be in the abstract. Your hypothesis or your research question, the analytical methods you used, and a quick summary of that and implications of research. I've included a reference to the article that this is abstracted from, so be sure and explore this. And all of this presentation is in the Whova app, so you can kind of grab this out. So, and an abstract means to write the word abstract at the center, top of the page, centered and in a bold font. Set the page margins 1 inch. That's true for your whole article. Double space your text, and it should be justified. Do not indent the first line, and keep it under 250 words. That's the abstract. And then keywords, we're just saying you write keywords in italics, and then we're using 5 to 6 keywords in there. And these are written on the same line as the label. Using lowercase letters, use commas, but not conjunctions. Okay, those are the keywords. And that helps people, that is very useful for people being able to find your article in the research databases. Okay. The blind copy, you want to take out the author information page, which you included in your main document. Remove any mention in the text would allow the reviewers to know the identity of the authors. In other words, if you're working at Loyola University, you would not want to say that. You want to say at Midwestern Research University or a West Coast private liberal arts college. This same construction is that should be in both of them, actually, both the blinded and the non-blinded copy. Okay, so that's how you refer to your institutions. And references, it says you can submit in any style or format. We use APA 7. I'd say work at an APA 7. And that means author name, book, journal or book title, the article, chapter title, the year of publication, the volume and issue where appropriate, and page numbers. And the APA manual tells you how to do this. All the bibliographic entries have a citation in the text. So one of the things that the author the publisher does is they look at the references at the end and say, is this referred to back up in the article? I guarantee you go through revisions, we'll drop out a reference, a citation that is in your reference list. It's a very common problem. So make sure you do a search. Go under your, when you get done, go to all your references and take the author's name, first author's name, and do a search. See whether that's still back up there in the text. And if you can use a digital object identifier DOI number in your reference, that's very useful. It's not required, but it's really useful for people being able to sort of reading your article, go click on that and go look at that article. So that's really a useful tool. The author page, we're going to have the full names, their affiliations. We want to include ORCID. That's a tool for people who are authors to register themselves with any social media handles. And we want to make sure that one author is identified as the corresponding author. And that person's email address will be displayed in the journal article itself. So they can click and email you from that journal article. And what we want included on this page is the author's affiliation when the research was conducted. People move and change jobs. You want to make sure that you put their affiliation is at the time the research was conducted. And here is the editorial board, and it's a worldwide editorial board. We have members from all over the United States. We have members from Ireland, from South Africa, from Australia. So this is an international journal. It has lots of submissions from all over the world, lots of article downloads from across the world. And this is a wonderful editorial board. Really, I'm pleased to be working with them. I'm joined today by two of the members, so good. So questions, I'll stop this and we'll see if you have some questions. We've got about a little less than 10 minutes.
Walt, I have a question.
Yes.
When does research get old? I think you mentioned 10 years.
Well,
Go back and look at.
I think going back 10 years is useful to see what has been published in the field, but I think some research is still quite useful after a long time. An example of this, let's say you want to write an article about persistence. Well, you probably should be referring to Tinto at some point in that, and that was published 25 years ago. So sometimes this research sticks with us for a long time because nobody's published anything better. So I wouldn't ignore stuff. I've seen articles which sort of quoted third generation writers about transformative learning, and they didn't acknowledge the central authors of transformative learning. So or somebody that's writing stuff that's really about andragogy and was quoting an article from 1998 and not acknowledging Malcolm Knowles. So I think that's a weird thing to do. So I don't think there is a rule about how old research can be, but I think a person should display a knowledge of the key figures in the field. If you're going to write about andragogy, you better be acknowledging Malcolm Knowles. You're going to write about, more engaged forms of learning. I think you should be referring to Dewey, and that's from 1900. So,
Yeah.
Just think you want to display that you know the literature, and you know the field.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Walt, if I may, I raised my hand, but maybe you overlooked it. I agree with your grounding advice. And remember that sometimes there might be gaps in the research, especially in continuing education or adult education. It could be something that was focused upon maybe in the late 90s with adult populations, and then whatever your revised or renewed topic maybe coming back around in the literature. So, it depends on what your topic is. And I completely agree that sometimes you have to go back 20, 30, even 100 years. If you don't include that grounding foundation somewhere in your article, then it shows a gap. And so don't be afraid to have a few articles that may be older, but it shows you understand the field.
Right. Good point. Other questions or comments?
Can I pose another comment?
Sure.
This is something that pops up with the journal every once in a while, that I receive an article to review that actually has negative outcomes. And, everyone in this excessively positive and superlative world thinks that unless my project at my institution was successful, it's not worthy of publication. It's absolutely the opposite. That in education, we need to learn from everything. We need to learn about the successes and also the failures. And so it's not often, but when I'm presented with a research article that is bold and says, well, our initiative failed, but you know what? We suggest that you at another institution try something else. And that comes out of the discussion and the next steps and things like that. So even at your institution, if something didn't work really well, share it so others can learn.
Thank you.
And so anything that is submitted anytime soon, you're looking at a 2023 publication date if accepted. Is that correct?
Let me explain that. So let's say you submit an article tomorrow. I guarantee you it won't get through the review process. Let's say it's accepted, it goes to a first review, it comes back. I guarantee you they're going to ask for changes. I haven't seen them ask for anything ever come through that doesn't get some suggestions for changes. Okay, that's bounced back to me. And usually they take the full 45 days to do their reviews. Okay, I'm going to send that to you. You got 30 days to get the stuff back to me. Then I turn around, go back to the reviewers and say, would you re-review this? They've got 30 days to do that. So all that taken together is going to mean about 6 months. Then it gets to me and it's been approved by both of the reviewers. I'm going to send to you something that says that the reviewers came back, said, we can accept this with these little bitty changes, or let's accept it as it is. I'm going to send you a note that says it has been accepted. It's going to enter our editorial process in which we will try to perfect the article before it goes to the publisher. Then Catherine comes on board at that point and works her magic with the article and works it into a really fine shape. She works it up. It's gone through the fine tooth comb. The periods are all where they're supposed to be. The article is in APA 7. It is very thoughtful and detailed editing. Far more than I would do. I really appreciate her quality and skill in that regard. And then we submit it to the publisher. The publisher takes it and they take typically about 30 days to produce a typeset version. And that comes back to you to look at, comes back to us to look at to make sure that it's correct. And then we submit our changes. That goes back up, takes another 30 days. When that's done, the article is actually published at that point. It's published in Taylor and Francis online, but it may not be published in a print version, a quote print version of the journal until 2023.
Got it.
Okay, does that make sense?
It
So your
does.
article is online much earlier than it can ever appear in the print version. Because that's just where we've had this big surge in submissions, and we can't get them all published in quote published because we don't really print any versions of it. Like 30 versions of it are actually printed. So that's about it. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much. I am available to you at any time to help you in thinking about this. I think I won't speak for Martha Ann and for Susan, but I have found them to be very helpful and supportive of our authors. So if you need anybody to react to something, reach out to us. We can certainly help you with that. And Amanda, I think that's pretty much what we need done. We've got all our stuff done on the chat, and we captured your ideas, and Catherine's been writing them down too. So we're going to follow up with you to see where you're coming with those articles. Okay.
I think Amy had one final question or comment. Amy, is that right?
Do I have time to ask it really?
Yes.
What do you consider to be the hottest topic right now, Walt?
Well, we're getting a lot of submissions about COVID-19 and its impact on higher education. Obviously, that's a lot of topics right now. I think that's going to fade. I'd say our hottest topic is always serving adult learners. That's the thing that gets the most interest. When I look at how many of our journal articles get clicked on and read and downloaded, it is always the top 10 of those are the articles that are focused on how do you better serve adult learners. It could be the peer mentorship. It could be, better advising. It could be PLA. It's all those topics in which we're trying to make sense of how do we best serve adult learners. And the second area is stuff around faculty. So how do you better train faculty? How do you support faculty better? That's another two areas. So you look back at the chalk call for submissions. It says what we're seeing in terms of our level of interest. So definitely, I'd say just think about that. Key thing is how do you serve adult learners? That's the enduring concept of JCHE. It's what we really see a lot of interest in those articles, and that's what we tend to publish a lot of. Okay, any other questions? Thank you all.
That was a great question, Amy. So I will wrap us up today. Just a couple of final reminders. This has been a great conversation. If you are interested in continuing the conversation, reaching out to anyone after, I know Walt had shared contact information on the slides, but everyone is also accessible via Whova. So you can go straight to the presenter or straight to the presentation on the agenda. You can find the presenter information. You can also find a copy of the slides. Walt was so kind to put those up there. You can also connect with anyone else from within the session. You can go to the attendees list, search by name, and connect with everyone that way. I do want to remind everyone, if possible, please complete the session evaluations in Whova. We really do appreciate and value the feedback that comes through from our attendees. So please remember to take just a minute of your time to do that. And then as we conclude here, we are just at about 3 o'clock Eastern time. Our next concurrent session will be starting in about 15 minutes. So take yourself right back to the Whova agenda, find the session that you're going to attend, and you'll have a chance to visit there before our end of the day wrap up. Thank you again, everyone, for your time and your engagement today. Thank you, Walt and Catherine, for your expertise. And I hope to see many of your articles published in JCHE over the coming years. All right, take care, everyone. Have a good day.